Parents, treat us the way you want to be treated. We aren't dogs, you know. That literally is the most perfect way of explaining what I've been trying to say this entire episode.
Before this episode starts, we'd just like to issue a trigger warning for talks about body image, suicide, as well as descriptions of self-harm. Please take care of your mental health, and if you believe any of these topics might be triggering for you, please do not continue with the episode.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Hailey, the founder of Because Mental Health, and this is Megan, my co-founder and head of projects. It's been a while, but welcome back. Today's episode is called From Teenagers to Parents, where we read anonymous submissions from our community who are brave enough to share their own personal experiences and relationships with their parents. Whenever we think of the term generation gap, we often think about like the artists or actors or even trends that were of our parents' generation, but it can also be used to give reason to the misunderstanding between parents and their kids sometimes, especially when it comes to mental health. We hope that this episode is a place where teens can find comfort in these submissions, knowing that they are not alone, and that parents can tune in to get a deeper understanding of the truth behind teens' actions that never really made sense to them. So yeah, let's get into the first submission. The first one says, Dear parents, I thought of suicide when I was in grade 4 till now. Sometimes I cannot fall asleep and I am really stressed by the pressure to do better for marks and extracurricular activities. Although you might not be the main reason for my stress, you almost never listen to my opinions regarding if I want to continue learning a particular thing or not. You just say it is good for you and it seems better to finish it. I hope you can understand my feelings.
I think that's definitely, I guess, the main issue of it is about stress and the pressure and being in Hong Kong. I definitely think that that's a core issue that everyone goes through. So yeah, like obviously both of us came from DGS, which is like a band one school, so of course the pressure is like really high, and obviously it's like a private school, so there's also something that comes with that in a way. I guess in your experience, how did you feel with all the pressure and like obviously you are quite successful and you're doing I mean pretty well mentally. So do you like what is your response to all of that, I would say?
Yeah, I think the pressure, especially after getting into high school, was really tough, especially seeing so many people around you who are such high achievers and they're doing so many things with different organizations, different teams, being chair ladies of certain music teams in our schools, which is like the most prestigious level you can get, basically. And so the pressure to do just as well as them or to just even be comparable to them is something myself and I'm sure a lot of people in our school like constantly think about. And I think when it comes to my parents, there was like an issue with cello because I used to play the cello and I used to hate it. I had no talent. And because squash was still my priority, I didn't have a lot of time to practice either. But it was like a thing that I also had to continue because it was good for me and it was better to finish it. So I ended up having to like finish well, my parents told me that I had to finish grade 8, but they eventually gave up on me. So I kind of just quit after I got into secondary school. But I think the main thing is to the main issue with trying to do something or continue something that seems beneficial is that you're not passionate about it and you just you don't see yourself in the future thanking whatever you did. Like I don't see me thanking myself for playing the cello, you know. It was kind of just like a dark past that I never want to go back. So yeah, that's kind of what I have.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, especially, I think we'll mention a lot more later because there's a specific submission that's about this. But like with BMH, I know lots of people kind of think that it's something that we're doing as like an academic thing or like an extracurricular that kind of is to like boost applications, which it could definitely be. But I think that there are a lot of people putting a lot of pressure into themselves to do something like this, to start an ECA or start an organization. And like, as you said, if it's not going to make you happy, if you're going to look back in 10 years and be like, I spent a lot of time on doing something that, I didn't care about just for, parents' approval or college admissions, and that just seems like such a waste, and it's going to be like so mentally draining for you. But the submission also kind of talked about parents never listening to your opinions. And I really want to talk about this because I think we both have expressed in previous podcast episodes that our parents are a little bit more on the conservative side on many mental health issues. And especially like my parents, I had to bug them for at least like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years to even go to a therapist. And now I don't even go because they thought that, hey, you already have the medication. That's all that really needs to happen. It's a long story, but yeah, basically, what kind of your experiences with that, with parents not listening to your opinions, and have you actually developed a strategy or a method to kind of let them actually listen to your opinions or actually get your point across to them?
So there was this like the most recent incident where this had happened was with my SATs. So I took it once and I was happy with my results, but my parents kind of talked me into doing one more, taking the test one more time. And it was something I'm really against because I took my second SAT in August. And early August, I just didn't feel like I was prepared. I didn't feel mentally well. I was very burnt out because I kind of just finished my exams and had to move to an SAT immediately. So I struggled a lot for the next 2 weeks, kind of paying attention in class, but also not really because we had like tutors for SAT, right? And so what I eventually did, because I just couldn't handle it anymore, was I actually WhatsApped my parents about it, like wrote on my notes app and then told them about it through it because there was no way I could talk to them in person. And while they kind of understood, I ended up taking it anyways because it wasn't like they now understood my point of view and why I feel like it wasn't a right time for me to take the SAT, but they also made it seem like I should because the pros outweighed the cons. So I understand from a technical point of view, but at the same time, when I had tried to open up, then they really they try to understand, but they also just don't. So this submission does hit close to home because, a lot of things had happened and squash wasn't even the sport that I really wanted to play until later on when I kind of started talking to my therapist and got my path straight. But yeah, so there was a lot of back and forth, and I can tell you 100% that I have never won a single conversation before other than getting my therapist, because that was something I reached out to them about, and I was lucky enough that they were happy to find someone for me. So while it was hard to open up, the process of getting to a therapist was pretty straightforward for me.
Yeah, parents, as you grow up, you kind of realize that they're their own people, and as much as they like care for you, they also have their own emotions and their feelings. So I always like to think of my parents as like talking to a friend, as in if you ever are in an argument, you have to have that notes app argument. You have to have those like 3 bullet points, topic sentence, all of that. So I definitely think that that's a really good way of just communicating with parents, with anyone in general. And yeah,
That's probably why so many people in our school are good at debate, because they just have to do it every day at home.
Probably. I think most like under pressure students will thrive in debate environments. Just inherently, that's a personality trait within themselves.
You start training at 6 years old.
Yeah, exactly. So now going back to the submission, they did talk about suicide, which I definitely have a lot of kind of experience with. And they said that they've had suicidal thoughts since grade 4. I definitely think that I started having those kind of thoughts very, very young. I remember specifically at 10 years old, I literally told my mom that I wanted to die. And I don't think that that's normal, even though the submission, they themselves said that they had the same experience. So why do you think that is? Do you think it's like in this modern day, this like culture, social media kind of glamorizes this like um feeling, or is it just because like inherently when we feel sad, when it gets way too overwhelming, our first thought is just what is the easiest and most permanent way to solve this problem, if you kind of get what I mean.
Yeah, I think very interesting it's very interesting to know that we often put social media as a main reason why so many kids are exposed to suicide thoughts or yeah. I think because this submission says that she had suicidal thoughts when she was in grade 4. So I'm assuming that she actually didn't have a phone then, and the popularity of Instagram was kind of not really there yet. So it's interesting to see because I have a feeling that it didn't stem from social media. So it can either be, something inherited or something that she encountered before among her friends or even like adults and family members, maybe. So I think the environment can be a huge factor um, about dealing with negativity because, a lot of stuff you learn from your parents at a really young age. So if you constantly see them not being able to handle stress well, you end up learning their traits as well. So yeah, I think that's a possibility. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm kind of looking back to grade 10, not grade 10, when I was 10, and I'm like, I don't think I had Instagram back then, but how did I actually gain these thoughts? It might have been movies. It might have been the culture around me. I truly don't know. But on that note, though, why do you think that as young children, our first like how did we get to suicide instead of, solving the problem or other kind of methods? Why is it suicide? That's the first thing. Obviously, just now you did talk about genetics, but I don't know. I feel like you're like being in grade 4, the thought of death shouldn't be the first thing that comes out,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just the way things are in communities where there's a lack of listening. Like, our parents rarely ask a 10-year-old, how are you feeling today? Or are you okay? You only get exposed to these questions when you're older, and when you actually have things to stress about. I'm not saying like a grade 4 student doesn't have anything to stress about, but that's now is like the prime time where things are getting really stressful and overwhelming. And so this is kind of when suicidal thoughts might appear. But as a grade 4 student, you just, I don't know. I mean, you have a lot of friendship problems in primary school. You'll end up hating going to school because you have to deal with all these people. Um, and I did have a fair share of hating school as well in grade 3 and grade 4 because that's kind of when all of the friendship problems were happening. Even though it was like the tiniest of things, it just made me like go in the bathroom and cry. Um, so yeah, maybe she went to DGJS.
Definitely. Definitely. That environment was a little bit of toxic one,
Mhm.
to say the least. But yeah.
And also, when we're talking about the term "it's good for you," and when our parents constantly say that things are good for you, they we always have to remember that they have good intentions behind it, right? They're trying to let you know that everything they ask you to do is good for you, like eating your veggies or playing an instrument because apparently it makes you smarter or more intellectual. And so, um, I think while we have to keep that in mind, that it's good for our future, we have to remember that it also has to be good for your mental well-being, right? And so, as a little grade 4 student, you might not have the power or the choice to say this is not good for my mental health, but as you grow older you should also learn to um just you don't have to convince your parents, but you have to let them know that it's something bothering you. Like my parents knew I hated the cello, and they eventually quit. They eventually let me quit even before they reached their target, right? And so, um, you know, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And it goes back to the point I made just now that like parents are people, just like
Mhm.
normal people, and just because they have a baby does not mean they're smart enough or caring enough to take care of that child. So whatever they think is good for you, yes, like remember behind everything they have good intentions. They want you to do well, but like if it's really, really bad for your mental health, speak to them as a friend. Like even like as teenagers, we'll probably go to our friends for advice for like relationships or everything,
Mhm.
and they'll give you advice because they think it's good for you. But obviously, most, if not all of the advice will be helpful, but there are some that you won't want to take or you think won't apply to your situation. And you are completely valid to not take that advice just
Yeah.
because your friend has good intentions. And so I definitely think that applies for this case, even though your parents think that something is good for you. If it really just doesn't apply for you, I think you have 100% no obligation to take on that responsibility or take up that ECA, whatever. You
Yeah.
have to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
So,
So it's, when parents say that it's good for you, it's often good for your CV and not for your well-being.
yeah,
So we always have to keep that in mind.
always in that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do have to say, a lot of things that my parents made me do that were good for me, like doing the violin, the piano, um, take this all with a grain of salt because this took like 10 years. But at the beginning, I like really, really hated the two. And I would like I'd be forced to go to orchestra. I'd be doing like classes
Mhm.
outside of school. I ended up needing to like do grade 8 and diploma. And I remember even doing my like ATCL diploma. I was like, I hate this instrument. Like, I'm never gonna take it up till like year 13 as we call it
Mhm.
in the UK. But
Yeah.
like now that I'm in uh, the last few years of school, I'm actually loving the violin. It gives me a kind of respite from all the school stress and all that. And like, I might even want to go to music college. So like, everything really changes. So you also have to put, everything in mind that I guess emotions do kind of change over time. But
Mhm.
if it really is stressing you out and if it's causing you to have suicidal thoughts, that's definitely a part
Yeah.
uh, where you have to be like, maybe even in the future, if I do like the violin, suicidal thoughts are just
Mhm.
not worth it, and you probably should stop or just talk it out with someone. And as we've said many, many times, I think therapy or literally just talking to a licensed professional is the best um, solution or the best kind of plan of action in that case. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because my brother also played the cello and he also hated it. He cried every time he had to go. But now that he's in high school, he's joining orchestra. So like, yeah, it's funny how things change over time, and sometimes our parents are right in a way, because like the SAT thing that I took in August, it ended up being a better score than my previous one. So so it might be luck, but it also just might be um the benefits of listening to your parents
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, I'm glad I made the move to let them know about my mental health. I think that was an important step for not just building boundaries, but also for building the relationship I have with my parents. Yeah.
Okay, so to any parents listening to this podcast, what would you want to tell them in regards to this submission?
Yeah, I think, like I previously said, I think the word good from the it's good for you, it branches out into two perspectives of your kid's future and also your kid's well-being. And being able to balance that out is really, really hard as a parent. And I'm sure that it's a very, very big struggle for every single parent, especially Asian parents. But I think that it's something worth digging deeper into and worth talking to your children about it. And remember that your kid is still really young. I think, especially because the submission said that she already thought of suicidal thoughts in grade 4. I think there's still such a long way to go in her life, and you can slowly let her find her interest and slowly let her build her extracurriculars herself. You want to, yeah, you don't want to over emphasize on the fact that your kid needs a lot of extracurriculars, like in primary school, because as you get into secondary school, most students will have a rough idea of what they're passionate about, and they'll want to do more in that field. So I think I think time is a really important factor as well. Give yourself time, give your kid some time to figure out what they like, what they don't like, and let them make choices on their own.
Mhm. Yeah, like, okay, I'm assuming most of the parents listening to this podcast come from Hong Kong or just, I guess, schools that we're kind of affiliated with. And I definitely find that parents from other schools, like in the US, public schools, they kind of let their kids have more free reign with extracurriculars. They allow them to discover their interest. And actually, those children kind of turn out better in terms of mental well-being as well as with college applications because that personal statement part, you can really show your personality. And I 100% know that college admissions people can tell that, oh yeah, that person was like forced by their parents to do something. So I definitely think that allowing a kid to have free reign, especially in primary school where like grades really do not matter, and ECAs, like you might want to have a foundation of everything, but I assure you every single instrument, every single sport can be picked up at the age of 10. Like you don't have to start them at the age of 4 in every single thing. It's completely okay. There's this thing in Chinese where it's like yeah, like yang zhai hei pao xin, which basically means like you have to be winning in the starting line, where you have to have all the foundations ready from the beginning. I don't think that that should be applied in this society, because it really places so much pressure on a kid when it first of all isn't necessary, and second of all is just so damaging to them. And I feel like it's such a waste of, well, the child's potential, as well as just a person who could have grown up to be extremely happy and fulfill their potential, but in the end kind of wasted it in quotation marks because they were burnt out or stressed out or forced by their parents to do something. I went on a little ramble there.
No, I completely agree with you. I think before we move on to the next submission, because we spent half an hour on this already,
Yeah.
but the last thing I want to say is that passion beats talent always, right? You can be very talented at a sport, but you can also hate it, and the other person who's very talented will work hard because of that passion and eventually just outdo it. And so I think I think the main thing that has gotten me through the past 10 years of life was passion and being driven to a goal. and working towards that goal myself without the influence of my parents forcing me to do anything.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I guess that will be our first response, and we hope it really helped whoever submitted it or helped anyone listening, because I'm sure that this is an issue that kind of corresponds to many other people. But now we're going to head on to our second submission, which talks about a lot of different things. So I'm actually going to separate this. So I'm just going to read a section, a paragraph of it, and then we're going to discuss that paragraph. But I'll just get started. So the submission reads, "Dear parents, thank you for raising me and providing me everything and more that I will ever need. But I must remind you that just because you give me all these things, that doesn't give you the power to mentally abuse me. You say I keep things from you. Maybe it's because I can't trust you, leaving my room to get some water and then coming back to see you on my computer. You've always asked for my privacy, and may I ask, where's mine?" So I want to stop there because I definitely think this is a thing that happens with, I guess, tiger parents, quote unquote, where they'll kind of invade your privacy, want to know everything that's on with your life. They'll like check your text messages. My mom definitely checked my text messages up till the age of like 13 when I
Right.
went to the UK, so she couldn't really check them anymore. So what do you think about privacy with parents, and if you have any stories, do you want to give them kind of?
So this submission is not really, it's not really easy for me to touch base with this one because I never had to deal with issues where they just come into your room and see what's on your computer. But there has been cases where I was still I just first started using my phone, and they're just like they're like every single password my mom knows. And I think while that's a little unsettling, I also know that she doesn't check it. Like it's just kind of there for, I don't know why, but it's just like she knows, but she also doesn't physically log in and take a look at what I'm doing or what I'm seeing. I think it was just making sure that I was safe for the first few weeks of using a phone, making sure that I'm not talking to strangers, but that was about it. So it was all good intentions and I didn't really mind. So yeah, what do you have?
Yeah, I am a much more private person, I think, and I'm a much more paranoid person,
Hmm.
especially since I'm in the UK and I've kind of become more independent in many ways that might not be the most parental friendly, but I completely agree with the fact that like mm, I don't think that I think this kind of goes back to the thing where it's like parents think that it's good for you. They want you to, not be harassed by strangers on the internet. They want to know what you're doing so that, you're safe. And I definitely have had a fair share of bad experiences because my parents were not there to be able to shelter me because I hid stuff from them. So I definitely think that, your parents having some sort of access to your life is still very important. Um, but I also think that like going into someone's computer without their permission is kind of stepping over the line a bit. And as the submission says, like you breaking someone's privacy and trust makes them want to like reveal stuff to you less, which could make it really unsafe in the long run. Like, though I have grown in a relationship with my parents where I do tell them a lot of things just because now I feel more safe talking to them because I know that what they're doing is for my own good, and I know that they actually care for me. Um, so that's made it a lot better. Like obviously I still have my own privacy, but I do trust them in that way. So I definitely think that you need to strike a balance between just going into their, computer or their text messages and just allowing them to open up to you. I think that parents really need to let the child determine what they want you to see, what they want you to hear. And I think that's the best way of kind of establishing a relationship in a
Yeah,
way.
and I also think with the trust issue, I think the first thing that parents should be aware of is that you should only ask your children to do something if you can do it as well. So it's something like you have to, if you want to tell your parents to eat your veggies, then you have to eat them yourself. And if you want to set a 1 hour screen time for your kid, then you have to be able to do that 1 hour as well. And I still think that's very, very important because it wouldn't make sense to have just 30 minutes of screen time when they're using 8 hours. You need like a role model, and you need the person who set the rules to be actually also following the rules in order for trust to be built, I believe. And so, yeah, I used to have screen time as well. It was actually 1 hour, and my parents were like on bed playing Candy Crush every night. And so, I had to learn to put my feelings aside for that one, but it took like years. So yeah, I think I read that, I listened to that in a TED Talk, so it didn't come from me, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to link that TED Talk in the description once I find it. But yeah, I definitely think that just don't be hypocrite is something that can really help in most relationships, and especially in a parental one. But yeah, I guess for the next section of the submission goes, I am queer and scared. You make all of these judgments and assumptions about LGBTQ plus people. I will say it here, I have a partner, but I'm afraid that not only will I not have your support on a relationship, but I won't even have your support because of my sexuality. I definitely, as someone who is part of the LGBTQ community and do have, I would say, less liberal parents, it's definitely a big thing that I am very scared about. And it is one of the things that I do keep from my parents, and that's the sector of privacy that I think kind of I keep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that it's definitely still a generational gap kind of thing. It's not something that you can really easily change. You can definitely give them a lot of books to read or movies to watch that are about LGBTQ community. I definitely think that Everything Everywhere All at Once was a big one for my parents. I was like this,
They
watch
watched
it.
it? They
Yeah.
watched it? Oh
Well,
my
but
god.
okay, after watching it, they were just like, "Oh, okay." They didn't like cry or anything, even though I was like bawling my eyes out. Like my eyes were literally swollen the next day. But so, yeah, that's definitely a thing you can do. But I do think that this is a very, very hard issue to tackle because there's internalized homophobia, and just homophobia in general is something that is so ingrained in both just like East Asian society and just society and social media and everything in general. And I definitely think that it takes a lot of unlearning, and it needs to come from both the parents and like I mean, it needs to come from both the parents themselves wanting to unlearn it, as well as other people giving them resources. So it sounds really bad to say, but if your parents don't support you, I truly think there's nothing you can do about it, even if you try your best. And the best thing you can do is choose the safest course of action. I remember when some of my friends would tell me that their sexuality, and they would ask me if they should come out to their parents, the first thing I would say is, do you feel safe doing it?
Yeah.
If you do not feel safe doing it, do not come out to your parents. The only reason you should come out to your parents is if you feel empowered to do it, or if it really truly is necessary for any medical health reason. In any other case, if you feel like you are going to be abused, discriminated, whatever for it, I don't think you should be doing it. And I know this sounds really, really bad to say because we should all be extremely comfortable in our skin, but your mental health, your physical health should come way before all of that. And again, it sounds really bad to say, but after you're 18, you can move out, you can go to like a more liberal place, you can get emancipated from your parents. But that all comes if you stay alive and if you stay happy. So if coming out, if being someone who's LGBTQ is something that is a barrier to that, I would say don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess the next part of submission talks about depression and suicide. So again, a little warning on this. But it goes, I have depression and I am suicidal. I've been swimming for 11 years and playing basketball for 7. When I don't get the grades you want, when I don't swim the results you want me to, when I don't perform in a game as well as you wanted, is it necessary to yell or punish me? When I had swimming championships back in November, this is November of last year already. We've been kind of dragging this out for a while. I'm so sorry. But yeah, when I had swimming championships back in November, was it necessary to say I was a disappointment? Do you know how much that hurts? I'm going to stop it there for now because I really want to talk about this, especially since you are a student athlete yourself. How does it feel to be to kind of feel like a disappointment, be called a disappointment, or like just not do as well as you thought you did, and having that pressure both from yourself and from your parents, and just all of that compounded together? Like, how was that, and how have you kind of dealt with it?
Oh, it's great. I'm living my dream. So okay, so swimming for 11 years, that's insane. I've been playing squash for 10 years, and I know what it feels like to be feeling like you are a disappointment. My parents had never straight up told me that I was a disappointment, but you know, I have always felt that way. And I think we have these friendly matches called leagues every week. So I play leagues 2 times a week. And the issue with that is that you're constantly playing matches and you're constantly put under pressure every week. Even though there's just friendly games, it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect your ranking. Your parents are there to watch you play and they're there to criticize you. They're there to record your videos so that they can dissect it later at home. Yeah. And so I think the main core thing that parents don't understand is that we can't always perform. You know, we may be the best player or swimmer in Hong Kong, but there's always going to be days where we don't feel like the best, and there are always going to be days where things just don't work out and there's no way you can fix it. It just happens. There's no sports psychologist or therapist or medication that will help you with that particular game. It's just a bad day and there's no excuses or no reasons to it. And I think that should be a valid reason sometimes. You know, like when I go back home on the way home from these friendly matches, if I don't play well, then the whole car ride home will be about that match and it'll affect the rest of my day. And it'll be like I go home, I cry, I can't do work anymore because on the way home they make you think that they know the game better than you do, even though they don't play the sport, they don't swim. So why are you telling me this? You're not the one on court, right? And so, but then in comparison, when you play well, it's a totally different story, right? You go home, on the way home, your parents are so happy. They're singing Taylor Swift with you. And the rest of the car ride home is just always jokes and some stupid dad jokes that gets the whole family laughing. And I think while I'm very grateful that they are happy when I play well, it's devastating to know that there's such a huge comparison, right? Because parents should be there when you're down and they should understand that you're already putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do well. And if you don't play well, you also criticize yourself, right? You also know that there's no escaping this bad day, but you blame yourself for not being good enough to be able to fix this bad day. And so when your parents are also there to criticize you on your bad day, that makes things worse. Instead, if my parents told me those dad jokes when I didn't play well, that would be a better relationship. So I think letting your kid have time to process their own emotions before putting your own emotions on them is very, very important. And I can say the same for musicians as well. It's not just student athletes, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep on using this analogy, but I definitely think that now it's not the kids that need to think of their parents as their own people. I think it's the parents that need to think of their children as own peoples and not an extension of their personality or an extension of themselves, because, you know, they have their own life and they have their own stressors. And even if you yourself have, I don't know, done swimming for 11 years or even longer when you were a child, your child is a different person, and they, like, swimming is a different thing to them, and you should definitely not be putting your own experience, your own projection onto them. And I definitely think that you wouldn't treat you wouldn't treat a friend like poorly like that. If your friend lost a swimming competition, you would treat them as well as, you know, if they won. You would support them, you would give them a helping hand, you would give them a shoulder to cry on, you would support, laugh with them, listen to Taylor Swift with them. That is something you should do with your child as well. If they lose, it's fine. It might be a little bit of a blow to yourself, definitely. But you also need to know it's a blow on your child too. They're the one that's on court, in the swimming pool, whatever. They're the ones that are feeling the most disappointing. And at that moment, they need your support the most. So I would definitely think that, like, really think about what you would do in a case if it were your friend. If they lost a competition, you wouldn't go and start chastising them. You would try to make them feel as good as possible. And I think that's definitely a course of action that most parents need to really, really remember.
Yeah. I think the main thing that you said that hit me the strongest was that parents shouldn't be using their kids as an extension of their own achievements or personalities, because I know players, squash players, whose parents are actually squash players themselves. And I think they have it the worst, right? They know exactly what you're doing wrong. They can pinpoint what you do wrong, and they can analyze a game, and all they talk about is the sport you play or you both play. And so, yeah, like whenever let's say my parents try to criticize my game, at least sometimes I can butt in and say, oh no, you see, because I was doing this, so I couldn't do that, and therefore you're wrong, right? But when your parents are also players themselves, there's nothing you can do to save yourself, basically.
Yeah.
So that's kind of off topic in terms of the submission, but it's also something that parents should think about.
Definitely. So they continue talking about over the Christmas and Chinese New Year holidays, I've gained weight. Was it necessary to call me fat? Do you know how much it hurts as an athlete to say that, to hear that? When exams came in December, I was already all burnt out, and I'm not gonna lie, the only resource of happiness was my partner and my friends. I would Zoom with them every night because they were my motivation to study. I would be tired by dinner, and you called me lazy and blamed it on the phone. Oh, first, so much to dissect in that little paragraph. There's fat shaming, which I think so many people have gone through. And I'm gonna ask you specifically, how does it feel as a student athlete to be fat shamed? I know you've talked in the past that, like, you've been athletic all your life, so it's been less of a struggle for you. But have you heard that before, or?
Yeah. It's very different, especially in the basketball/swimming community, which is the exact sport she plays, because I've heard from some of my swimming friends that they have to like measure their shoulder lengths or make sure that their shoulders are broad enough in order to do the butterfly strokes. And basketball players are usually more built, and so even in the squash community ourselves, I know that people in the Sports Institute weight themselves. and measure body fat and all that. So one thing that is a huge issue is that it might not necessarily be body shaming from other people, but internal body shaming. So it's a lot of like seeing that fat percentage, trying to get it down, but it's also Christmas and Chinese New Year, so it's like, it's an internal struggle. And while I personally have never stepped on that scale before, so I actually don't know my body fat count, which is good. I also try to avoid going on the weight just to scale myself, because to me and my sport in particular, it doesn't really matter how much you weigh as long as you can run and chase balls and coaches are happy, right? But for swimming and basketball, they're a little different. And different sports, you need different features, right? You need to have broader shoulders, or you need to have more muscular legs, or you need to have a more flexible hip. It's always different. And so I think especially non-immediate family members, such as the grandparents, when they don't understand the sport that well and they don't understand what our body physically needs to play the sport, it's really challenging to tell them why you have broader shoulders than anyone else, and it's hard to tell why you have such thick thighs, because we have to go work out at the gym. We need to have stronger thighs to play certain sports. So yeah.
I definitely see you like even in the squash court, I see you like lunging all the time. I'm like, yeah, the muscles in there must be like just like hard. So, and I definitely know that, like, especially in East Asian communities, it's like thick thighs, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think again, it's such a ingrained thing in our society, but at the same time, you never hear your parents telling their friends, "Oh, you got fat," or "Oh, all of that." It's always like within families, and I think that's something that we really need to change, in that we need to see our family as, again, even though you guys are close, even though you guys are, family, they're their own people with their own emotions, with their own feelings, with their own insecurities, and you can't just be saying all that stuff willy-nilly, because they'll be really affected by it. But I guess they also talked about being burnt out, and then like their parents being like, you're spending all your time on your phone. I definitely hear that a lot. I also hear my burnout with using my phone, whether it be by like just watching YouTube or chatting with friends, because chatting with friends does give me a lot of oxytocin release, and it does make me happy. But again, parents really don't understand that. And so have you had that kind of experience? And because I don't really, I think that my parents have sort of accepted it as time has gone by, because they've seen that, even being on my phone, I've still been able to maintain good grades, and it's really helped me. But what about you? Have you had to communicate this in any sense? And especially with like burnout and parents, do you think that's something that your parents have necessarily understood yet, or no?
Yeah, so I have gone through the similar experience you had. So it's always about proving yourself in order to, make them realize that they assumed wrong, right? And so I did go out a really strong burnout phase, and the only thing that got me through it was a Skype app, so, yeah. And I think my parents took a long time to understand how it mentally helps me, because, being able to study with a friend and being able to talk to someone by the end of the night every day is such an important thing to have. And I think when my grades were really bad due to the burnout, my parents hated me for using the computer. They even considered setting screen time on my computer, which doesn't make sense to me because I need Google Docs for work anyways. But thank God that didn't happen. But yeah, it was like a big deal for them. And I think they made computers seem like it wasn't it wasn't a necessity, so I could kind of just study using pen and paper. Um, once I switched to the A-level system, my learning style suited that system better, and so my grades started going up, and they started to realize that it's okay to do whatever I want as long as my grades are up there, right? And so even though that's not like the best mindset to be in, because grades shouldn't be a measure of factor. It shouldn't be a factor to measure how hard you're trying, but it worked for me. So, but like I have tuned in online on my phone to cure my burnout as well. And I think social media has, I mean, not social media, but like this century in general has placed so much negativity on social media that we often forget that there's also so many positives that come with it, right? And I think parents being caring and them trying to look out for us makes it so hard for them to see the positives, because there's just so many negatives, right? There's so many crime or like news on goldfish memory or shorter attention span because of social media, and they forget that social media is the reason why we're one phone call away from our friends. And I think if we use social media correctly, social media can be such a beautiful thing to have. And it's just a place where you meet your best friends and you stay connected with your best friends no matter how far away you guys are. And I think, yeah, so for me personally, I've managed to prove to my parents that social media is not harming me, even though it's not in the healthiest way.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that myself was the same, but I think that what parents should really be doing is like looking back on their own social media patterns, because they definitely like, your parents, they use Instagram or just they use their phones, and I think they would have also realized that, social media does make them happy or make them more productive in different ways. Of course, it makes them unproductive in other ways, but it does help them in many ways. And I think that they need to understand that, you as a child, I think you're more susceptible to the effects of social media, both in the good and the bad ways. So it definitely can be helpful in many different ways. I know there was another submission that we will be talking about in a later episode that also did talk about parents kind of taking away their electronics and their phones as a form of punishment. And I definitely think that that is something we should start to avoid, because, first of all, now, especially after COVID, so much homework and just work is set online. And if you lose your phone or a computer or whatever for one day, you could end up having like a huge pile of work overdue, and it is something that it ruins your mental health even worse, makes your grades way worse. So that's something we should definitely stop. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about this section.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, the next part says, I would like to say one thing. How dare you? You've mentally tortured me so bad that 2 days before exams, I put a blade against my wrist. I regret it so much now, but I couldn't turn to you. You would say I was making it up or asking for attention, or I was trying to make excuses, and I thought I was a burden to everyone else. The scar still haunts me every single day, and I hate it. So both of us have self-harmed before, so I think this does relate in a few ways. For me, I did scar myself on my stomach, and it is something that I am really ashamed about to this day. Not the fact that I did it, but I guess the fact that the scar still remains, and it's a permanent reminder of the moment of the mental state I was in. And I definitely have heard a bunch of people say, oh, you're just doing it for attention. You're just doing it so that people feel sympathy for you. But I think that's false in so many different ways. I think that most people, myself included, like I did it in a space where the only way you can see the scars is if I'm wearing something like low-waisted. And I think so many people, the first instinct they have after they like self-harm isn't to tell people, it's to hide it. That's why so many people wear like long sleeves or all of that. And so I think it just doesn't make sense. And it really, really hurts when someone says that, because the only reason they tell you is probably because they trust you enough to ask you for advice or just tell you, um, and that instantly removes all credibility, all trust, all determination, all hope that they can reach out to you in the future, because if you're just going to criticize them, then what's the point? So, like, I think that using the analogy again, what if that were someone that, your partner or your friend that went up to you and said that, like, you would care for them, you would be extremely, you might be disappointed, you might be hurt, you might be sad, but you'll never say that they're making it up, even if you can't see it. I know this kind of relates to many different issues like sexual assault and different issues where people are often saying, oh, you're making it up, you don't have proof. Think about it as if it were your best friend. You wouldn't ask for proof. The first thing you would do is look at it from a place of compassion, from a sense of friendship. And I think that's definitely something that you need to apply in every single situation. But yeah, what is your thought on all that?
Right. So I do have a question for you, because yes, I did self-harm, but not in a way that left me scars. So I've seen online that people are proud of their scars. There are like quotes around that says people are proud of their scars because it reminds them of the hard battles that they eventually did pull through, right? But at the same time, there's also people who are very ashamed of it, even though the scar has completely healed and it's been like years ago. And I want to kind of understand your views on your scars and how, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I personally, if and at core deep down, I don't actually, I'm not actually that ashamed of my scars. Like, um, I sometimes snap people and they see my scars and I'm like, okay, that's chill. But I think my mom has ingrained it so much into me that it's so bad. Like, she gives me scarring cream to put on every night, and like she never lets me wear anything low waisted. She never lets me wear bikinis because of my scars. And like every single thing that people kind of repeat to you, or anything that society kind of ingrains in you, it kind of just, you know,
You internalize it.
you definitely internalize it. But I definitely think it it's really, really good to think of it as an empowering thing. But at the same time, if you're someone who is scared of being ridiculed by people or mocked by people, I definitely think that, as I said earlier with the whole coming out thing, you should never do anything that makes you feel unsafe. If you feel that you are empowered, that you want to show off your scars, that is completely okay. And I completely support you for doing that. My best friend, they show off their scars because they are completely recovered from everything. And they're active mental health advocates. So they do that. But as someone, even though I am a mental health advocate, I have not truly kind of delved more deeply into that self-harm aspect of mental health. And honestly, I go to a private school, an all-girls private school, and that sort of thing is very definitely stigmatized. So for me, I personally won't show it off, but I think it really depends on each person. But yeah, that's a little bit of a tangent. Yeah.
Yeah. With my own personal experience with self-harm, it normally comes in a form of pinching. And so, because it's the easiest way to self-harm on court, right? Because the only way I can breathe on court for a while was through pinching. Because, when you're training with people who you end up competing so much with, there's always competition no matter what. So I deal with so much anxiety and pressure and comparison and jealousy on court every day that I needed to find a coping mechanism and a way to breathe and let myself feel like I'm present at the moment. And so pinching became the easiest way because I had no access to anything sharp, right? And so, yeah. And it was also the least visible way, I feel like. It was easy to hide. And even if it wasn't hidden, people would just assume it's a red mark and you accidentally bumped yourself or something. So it's easy to cover up as well. But I do agree with the fact that there's nothing, like, I don't try to hide it, but it's also not because I want someone to see it. You know, I think that's such an important thing to remember, because just because I don't hide it doesn't mean I'm proud of it, and it doesn't mean that I want people to talk about it, and it doesn't mean that I want someone to bring it up.
Exactly.
You know, and so I think, yeah, so I think, I mean, it's good to have someone care about you, and if someone sees me have a scar, I mean, I'd be happy for them to talk to me about it, but just not in person, or just maybe ask me first if it's okay to talk about it before trying to analyze it and tell me that I'm an attention seeker or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. Like, I wouldn't necessarily want to show off my scars, but if someone does see it, I won't be ashamed to be like, oh yeah, I definitely have self-harmed. And like, I am very happy to talk about it with people, but you know, it definitely, again, depends on the person. Yeah. Next part. The submission says that, wait, do you have anything else to add to this? Okay, yeah. The next part of the submission says, throughout the years, even when I was 5 or 6, I heard you say the nastiest things, but I thought it was normal because you were my parents, but there was a huge period of time that I hated you with an absolute passion. I also wish for you to stop comparing me with my sister because she isn't perfect either. Children and students are not objects. Some may have depression and can't focus. Others may have something bothering them. So please take some extra time to look out and look after these people. Even asking, "Are you okay?" means a lot. Parents, treat us the way you want to be treated. We aren't dogs, you know. That literally is the most perfect way of explaining what I've been trying to say this entire episode, which is, you know, parents, your children aren't yours necessarily. They're not an extension of your own personality, and they're all their own individual people, and you can't just apply your rules on them, apply your emotions on them, because they are their own people. And as someone who has an older brother, I know you do too, I definitely get compared to him a lot. He also, I guess, kind of gets compared to me. We kind of had a discussion about how he was kind of the guinea pig of the family because he had to do all of these activities first, and then after what he went through, you know, like after him doing the violin, my mom was like, "Hey, maybe Megan should do the violin as well because of my brother." So there's always an aspect of comparison that, like, it inevitably happens because you guys are in the same family. But I definitely think that it's such a harsh sort of pressure to put on someone. It's like it really gets internalized more because it's like, yeah, we share the same DNA, so it kind of makes it worse in a sense that, like, your sister or your brother or just your sibling is doing something that you can't. But what is your view on this? Because you also have siblings.
Look, I can go on forever talking about sibling relationships. It can be a whole other episode that we can dive into. But to shorten everything, I'm glad I had my brother to go through his path so that I can go the other direction and strive in my own way. I think you said that the guinea pig is so true, because what worked for him, I did too. But what didn't work for him, I went the other way. So it became like my life became so much more easier because it was no longer an experiment. It was like, you should do this, you should do that because it didn't work out for your brother. And there are pros and cons that come with it because I now reached the ultimate goal that I've always wanted to achieve since I was primary 5. So I know that my brother being the guinea pig worked out for me, right? But the cons that come with it are not being able to live the way you want to live because your parents proved to because your brother proved to your parents that he failed. So like, for example, my brother is not a failure. Like, he did not fail at anything, but I'm just saying, like, in a more exaggerated way. But I think the main issue with my brother being the guinea pig is that I was not able to go to the paths that didn't work out for him. So, for example, let's say if my brother didn't do well in high school because he eventually went to boarding school during grade 7 or grade 8, that also meant that I was not allowed to go. Like, it wasn't even a path that I could think about. So I had to stay in Hong Kong until secondary 6 because it didn't work out for my brother, and so does that make sense?
No, yeah, that completely makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I think that's the biggest issue with that. It's just that I will always think about what happens if I did this, or what happens if I did that differently, or what happens if I didn't listen to my parents and went that way instead. There's so many different outcomes, and in different scenarios, you always have a possibility to strive as well, So it's not like a one-way road to get to a final destination. So I think I'm kind of going off topic there, but at the same time, to pull back into the submission, comparing siblings, it's just pure wrong, because other than the fact that you guys share the same blood, there's nothing else in common, right? You guys play this different, you guys are good at different things. One might be good at drawing, one might be good at swimming, and you can't merge these two paths together. It's just impossible. And so I think really respecting their differences and knowing what they're good at and knowing what they're passionate about and letting them walk their own paths is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I have a really, like, completely different story, because ever since I was young, I was literally doing the same things my brother did, every single thing, violin or like math. I did like a math camp thing for the longest time. And this sounds like I'm bragging, but for a long time, it was said that I was just better than my brother when he was his age for a lot of things. However, my brother turned out very successful, and I've been kind of compared to him in the way that, like, I've been more smart than him. I feel a lot of pressure to be better than him, or at least equal to him. It is a weird sort of pressure, because it's like, there isn't that kind of pressure. Like, my parents have never pressured me to do that. It's so internalized, because it just seems like the formula is there for me to do all those things, but it doesn't happen like that. Every person is different, and I think that's definitely a thing that parents need to care about, that, like, not everything is a formula. Like, even in college applications, in cooking, in whatever, someone follows a recipe and they succeed at making, a cookie. Someone else might fail. Someone else uses the exact same college application essay, the exact same extracurriculars. Some other person might do the same. One might get into Harvard, one might not even get into any Ivies. Like, there is a huge, like, just because you follow a specific formula doesn't mean that you'll get the certain result. And I definitely think that parents need to remember that, is even within children, where you think, even within siblings, where you think, oh, they share the same blood, nature, nurture, whatever should be the same. It really isn't. Like, everyone is different. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, like, the moral of the story is that siblings are not the same, right? And so they should
Yes.
not be compared to follow a certain formula. Even like when you say that the formula could be the same, it also could be very, very different. So I think parents really need to understand that. I mean, I had to listen to a lot of conversations where um I used to be compared to my brother a lot in terms of what I should and should not do. Like, don't turn out like that. Don't do this, or else you'll turn out like that, or something along the lines of that. And so it really took my therapist to talk to my parents in order for that to stop, which I'm very grateful for. Um, and so therefore go to therapy. But yeah, so I think I had to deal with the comparison for a very long time. Not in not like yours, in a sense that I need to in a sense that they just really just remind me to not do whatever my brother did. Um, so I also am not close to my brother. Like, we don't talk at all, we don't text, we don't do anything of that sort. But I really sympathize with him because I can't imagine what it's like for a parent to say that um, his sister is better than him in any sort of way, because he was the guinea pig after all, you know. He had to go through a lot, and yeah, even though he's not in the world's best colleges, he's still doing a lot better now that he's on medication and all that, and I am very proud of him nonetheless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think we're both really proud of our brothers. We did have a
Mhm.
conversation about all this guinea pig stuff, and he did say that he always felt that he was never the favorite and that I was the favorite because he was the guinea pig and he made the mistake so that I could succeed. And then he succeeded so that I could succeed. But I personally thought that I was never the favorite because my brother was the successful one. You know, he got into the good schools, he got the good grades. So like we're all our own people, and I think that communication is so important. Like, parents, talk to your kids, talk, like siblings, talk to your other siblings. Like, this is so important, and there's so much you can learn from each other, and there's so much that doesn't need to be compared. I think just letting them exist, letting things happen, even if it seems like they're equal or able to be compared, just letting it happen is fine.
Yeah, definitely. And it all eventually works out, right? And I think building relationships is so much more important than trying to get into a better school than your other sibling. Yeah, in some cases, both siblings strive and everyone's happy. So there you
Yeah,
go.
exactly. I think that is it for the first two submissions. Uh, I think this episode has been dragged out for quite a while, but I do hope that both parents, siblings, students, friends have all learned something from this episode, whether it be to treat everyone as their own person,
Mhm.
as an ends of themselves rather than a means to an end, and that your mental health really does come before a lot of different things. Obviously, your physical health comes with your mental health, but yeah. Hailey, is there anything you'd like to say to conclude the episode?
I mean, while we all live under the same household 24/7, I think it's very, very important to make sure that your kids are your best friends. You've been saying that the entire episode. And so I want to reiterate that one last time. Stop and think about what you would say to your best friend and say it. Don't say it because don't use I care about you as an excuse to force them to do something or to punish them, because while there are good intentions of doing so, it's just not healthy at all. So don't do that, because that's all we've been hearing the past 16 years, and we don't need any more of that, right? We need more respect, more boundary setting, more communication, and more friendship.
So yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we will be back in a short time with all of the other submissions. So if you sent any, we will definitely be getting to them. Do not worry. But thank you so much, and we will be with you next time. Bye.
Bye.